What's the most stupid conspiracy theory that you've ever heard? Story 1. Two conspiracy theorists walk into a bar. You can't tell me that was just a coincidence, man. Two conspiracy theorists are driving a car when it gets smashed by a bus, and they die of their injuries. Being generally good people, they went to heaven. When they get there, St. Peter tells them that they can ask one question of God. So they go in front of God, and one of them asks, "Who actually ended JFK?" God responds, "Lee Harvey Oswald." The first conspiracy theorist looks at the second one and says, "Man, this goes a lot higher than I thought." Story 2. The nanobots were in the vaccines. Morons. The nanobots are in the drinks at McDonald's. That's why the straws are so big. During the height of illness, I worked with an older right-wing anti-vax nut who 100% believed they were putting microchips in the vaccine to track us. I picked up his brand new iPhone and gleefully showed him just how much he was already being tracked, showed him Chrome on his computer, and explained the GPS in his car. I explained not only was this literally already happening, but if they wanted to specifically target him for some bonkers reason, there were half a dozen easier ways to do it. "Well, that's just different, was all he said. These people flip-flop between paranoia about being tracked and utter indifference that they literally are. Story 3. There are two, probably lesser known, groups that I find pretty hilarious. One is the theory that many celebrities don't exist but are being played by immortal and long-living and reptilian, pick whatever you feel like, beings who rule Earth as a secret elite. The people interested in this will pour hours into studying random celebrity photos to compare jawlines, ear shapes, and so on, and then excitedly tell one another the findings. Something like, "Brad Pitt isn't real, he's actually being played by the Earl of York," or whatever. The other group similarly spends hours looking at pictures but of nature. They believe that there used to be a mighty race of giants on Earth who died and became rock formations. So they will show photos of mountain ranges that vaguely resemble body parts and be like, "There's a hand, there's one lying," and so on. Story 4. That germ theory isn't real, and we've been lied to about what causes illness for decades upon decades. Like, I heard of the people who don't believe HIV causes AIDS, but the people who don't believe that germs, bacteria, and viruses exist really threw me for a loop. Also, none of the astronauts who died during the Challenger explosion were even on the shuttle. They're all alive, existing under pseudonyms. The evidence for that is that one of the members had a twin brother, and as far as I can tell, certain people think all Asian folks look the same. It's just racism and stupidity. And I don't even know what the point of this conspiracy is. I can understand the bizarre logic of chemtrails, the USA attacking itself on 9/11, and vaccines being dangerous, but I don't know what the logic of the Challenger conspiracy is. Story 5. Honestly, any right-wing conspiracy theory in the last 10 years. They're also openly contradictory. I cannot fathom how anybody is stupid enough to parrot that nonsense. Antifa and the FBI attacked the Capitol. Ashley Babbitt was a hero. No, we don't want to see any of that investigated. Joe Biden engineered the largest election fraud in world history from his basement with dementia without leaving a shred of verifiable evidence. Whenever I hear the extreme right-wing conspiracy nuts, I'm left recalling the cult leader's handbook. Make them accept something insane and they will have set aside their critical thinking and can believe anything you tell them. It's literally cult indoctrination tactics in action. You lie and lie and lie, and when they start to believe it, you keep lying and making up the most insane things until eventually you've hooked them by the nose and pulled them past the point where they can wake up and realize how beyond all reason they've gotten. Story 6. Moon landing is pretty dumb, especially dumb for someone who was alive at the time. There was this little thing known as the Cold War going on, and subsequently a space race. We were in a competition with a world power that had satellites, telescopes, and radar. If we never landed on the moon, the USSR would have called it out in a matter of minutes and made the US look like fools. Also, we were pouring billions to trillions into the space race. The moon is close enough that with 1960s technology and enough money, you can get there and take a little stroll. What we're realizing about Mars is that there are a lot more problems to solve to get humans there. Everything from propulsion to life support to cosmic radiation than there were while to fling rockets at our nearest natural satellite. If Elon was smart, he'd be talking about retiring on the moon. That may be feasible within his lifetime. He'll never get to Mars. He won't survive the journey. Story 7. If you tell me 9/11 was an inside job, that it happened using controlled demo, that Building 7 shouldn't have fallen down, that there was no plane in the Pentagon, that we shot down 93, that Mossad planned the whole thing or anything about dancing Israelis, that the planes were holograms, that jet fuel can't melt steel beams, basically any of the popular conspiracy theories about that day, I'm going to assume you're an idiot. I can understand the desire to not trust the government. Here's the thing, though. Let's just say the US government staged the whole thing, took over 4 airliners, crashed 4 planes, and ended 3,000 people, used demolition explosives to take down the towers, and also stole some zillion-dollar secret from WTC 7 in the process. Let's say that all happened. They would need people in on it at every level: military, police, first responders, rescue, the media, and countless other places. Hundreds, if not thousands of people involved to make this happen. And in 40 years, not one has come forward? The only way you keep a secret is if only 2 people know it, and it helps if at least one of them is dead. These jerks can't manage to wiretap a hotel without it becoming global headline news. They aren't pulling off crap like that unnoticed. Story 8. Paul's dead in that it goes all out in highlighting the stupidity of those who believe and spread these stories. By stupidity, I mean specifically the failure to think through details for even a moment. Here's what would have to have happened. A guy dies in a car wreck. An ambulance and police arrive on the scene. It is determined that the deceased is just about the most famous celebrity in the country, in the top 10 around the world. Most versions of the story of his death in 1966, when the Beatles were still the Beatles. His bandmates are notified somehow. They get in contact with each other. It's 966. That means one at a time landline calls, perhaps deciding to get together in person to discuss as a group and decide to cover it up and replace him with a phony Paul so as not to derail their gravy train. They managed to track down all of the attending police, paramedics, and since by now Maka would have been taken to a hospital and pronounced dead, doctors, nurses, and the coroner, and convince them all to violate the law and their professional ethics to hide the fact that Paul died. All of this would have to have been done before any official forms were filed and before any word, Brilliant L, broke in the media. Or did they have to convince the media to keep it quiet too? Keep in mind that a Beatle dying in 1966 would have been the biggest news story of the year worldwide. After that initial push to get the conspiracy in place, they had a few other details to contend with, like Paul's family. They might be a little concerned if they just never heard from Paul again. And suddenly this other guy was claiming to be him publicly. Also, the body, what would have to be done with it? And by whom? More serious violations of law and professional ethics in that. And what's been done with his royalties all these years? The fact that anyone ever believed that any of this was possible, or, more to the point, never bothered to consider that all of this would have to happen, is just stupid, almost to the point of being beyond comprehension. Story 9. That schools are putting litter boxes in the bathrooms for kids. It's been proven to be nothing but a scam, but it's ran its course through 4 different countries now. It was propagated by Republican politicians during midterm elections. Texas passed a bill outlawing any non-human behavior by elementary school children, and people still insist that it's a real thing. I recently found out that my brother-in-law believes this. Despite the fact that it was thoroughly investigated and all claims have been proven false, he insists that public schools in New York are actually doing it. Story 10. Taking the illness vaccine would inject microchips used to track you. Brought to me via my youngest adult sister and her boyfriend. They said it with such conviction and a straight face, I didn't know what to say. This was when vaccines were first rolling out, and I was trying to convince everyone I could to get the jab. I have 4 siblings, and I'm fairly confident none of them, to this date, are vaccinated, and I know my 2 youngest sisters have had the virus multiple times. And yes, they have smartphones, which can trivially be used to track them, but it was like trying to convince a rock to sprout legs and walk away. I've never been so sad and ashamed. Story 11. I had a coworker who was convinced that Bolsonaro, the former Brazilian president, was the secret son of Adolf Hitler. He said that Hitler only had 1 testicle and was unable to conceive children. So Josef Mengele had several of his sperm samples in a lab that he was using to genetically engineer the perfect German heir. When Hitler died, apparently Mengele fled to Brazil with the samples and created the son of Hitler using them. This can supposedly be proven by the fact that Bolsonaro was born 10 years after Hitler died, and the fact that he signed an anti pet cruelty law, which apparently correlates with Hitler being vegetarian or something. He was so sure that this was true, he thought that once he published his book and revealed his theory to the world, Bolsonaro would be forced into exile. He'd often throw out random dates and then go, "See? Do you think that's a coincidence?" And look at you like he'd just made some mind blowing revelation. Story 12. Honestly, that Donald Trump is on the Epstein list of clients. Now, wait, hear me out. Biden was in office for 4 years with access to the files. If they had something that big to hit Trump with, it would have come out as soon as Trump running again was even whispered about. I'm not saying Trump isn't a womanizer. I'm not saying he hasn't perhaps done stuff he's gotten in trouble with women for doing. But if the Epstein files had Trump on there, and it was verifiable, it would be out in the public long ago. Logically, I am right. Story 13. Not the most stupid, but it pisses me off. Vaccines cause autism. My MIL is a conspiracy nut, but this is the most harmful one. My oldest has autism, was diagnosed at 3 years old. For the longest time, she denied his diagnosis. It didn't help that he was diagnosed by a certified NP and not a doctor. She refused to believe his diagnosis because it wasn't a doctor who diagnosed him. However, he couldn't take the comprehensive diagnosis because he was freaking 2 years old. Now he is 5 and he obviously has autism. He has very apparent stims, he is very sensitive to stimulation, and literally any doctor or therapist he's seen and has assessed him has said he has it. So she can't deny it anymore. But now she's trying to find something to blame, and she's become a vaccine nut. Even if it was true, it's not in my son's case, as we waited until he was 2 to begin immunizations, and he was diagnosed before we started. Before people came after me, it was for health reasons, and he's fully caught up on everything now. But my MIL is still pushing about vaccines, and it doesn't help that we have one more kid and one on the way. Story 14. I have many that I feel are the stupidest I've ever heard, but I'll share this one. That Harry Houdini was poisoned by a highly organized group of spiritualists. It only works if you ignore the actual circumstances and medical records around his death, or believe that turn of the century medicine in a time before mandatory hand washing and antibiotics wouldn't end you. I think the worst part was that it's being touted and talked about by people in the skeptic community, including Penn Teller, that the creator of said theory wanted to dig up Houdini's grave without the family's permission for a live television special, and that the creator of said theory also added in some unproven and fantastical aspects to Houdini's life that simply aren't true, that he was a spy for the Scotland Yard. If anyone wants to know, the book from which this conspiracy theory comes from is The Secret Life of Houdini by William Kalush and Larry Sloman, story 15. My sister's been trying to convince me of a lot of stuff lately. Apparently the Earth is flat and doesn't actually orbit the sun. We'd feel it if we moved that fast. Also, some rockets went a bit sideways, so apparently they can't leave the atmosphere at all. Also, gravity might not exist, and evolution might be caused by aliens tweaking our DNA. The government controls everyone and everything. They control the weather with cloud seeding to keep citizens in line. They make vaccines that cause infertility and force people to get them by enacting nasty mandates and lockdowns to strip our freedom. Birth certificates were invented so the government can steal your identity. Also, everyone gets a big fat bank account when they're born, but the government steals it so no one knows about it. Almost everything we think we know is propaganda to control the masses. She's done her research, of course. Instagram is well known for its academic credibility. Story 16. Flat Earth is too much, but I get why it exists. Given that some religions say the Earth is flat, and people are trying to defend important beliefs they have, the Mandela effect is one of the stupidest and most senseless I can think of. I believe semi-psychotic people tend to gravitate toward this idea. The idea is that people misremember things, bunch ideas into new phrases, and that media changes, not because things do change and people get confused, but because different dimensions intersect. And so the thing you remember never happened because your memories are from another dimension or whatever the hell. An example is something like Tom Cruise was in a movie called Dance 40 years ago, but people now think it was called Prance because he pranced around a lot. So, instead of realizing the film was called Dance, they will claim it was called that in another dimension. It's much more bizarre and complicated than that, no, and it appears to be heavily reinforced as a legit idea on many sites across the internet. Story 17, the adrenochrome organ harvesting crap. Adrenochrome use was fictionally mentioned in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. This is the root of the entire urban legend. Adrenochrome use in reality, however, has also been documented by a select handful of psychonauts who worked in labs where it was available. All of the reports basically said either no effects at all or a mild headache in a few cases. Lastly, adrenochrome is synthetic and does not come from human organs at all. In other words, it's a stoner myth that somehow got stolen by nutty conspiracy theorists to add a layer of extra stupidity to whatever claims they have made. Story 18. Birds aren't real. They're drones created by the CIA to spy on us. The problem I have with this is that I see baby birds all the time, and I can't believe that they're fake. I see people eating balut, and there's chicken embryos in there, which doesn't add up to electronics being built. Lastly, if birds aren't real and they're drones, who the hell has the time to go through all of the footage to pick out a specific person getting ready to do something dastardly that the birds detected and notify us of a potential plot or danger? It just doesn't make sense. BTW, for those who don't know. It was a hoax started for a psychology experiment that got out of hand. Story 19. Here's one that's obviously bogus, but pretty fun. When Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the guy whose death kicked off World War I, died, that was actually the second attempt on his life that day. With the first attempt, someone threw a grenade at his car but missed. The theory goes like this. The first attempt, the one with the bomb, was originally supposed to end the Archduke, but a time traveler went back in time and bumped into the assassin at the last second, throwing off his aim. A second time traveler then went back in time and shot the Archduke on his return journey, which was successful, thus setting history back on its original course. Given that Ferdinand's death directly caused World War I and thus, by extension, World War II, it makes you wonder what he did or maybe didn't do that averting that timeline was worth putting Germany of all things back into history. Story 20. Here's an old school one. I remember reading about a conspiracy theory that there was evidence that the moon landing didn't happen because all the astronauts were seen in Vegas that weekend. They were partying and womanizing. What I love about this conspiracy theory evidence is how ridiculous it is on the face of it. The US government is going to spend millions and millions of dollars, including hundreds, if not thousands, of people in a giant conspiracy that has global geopolitical implications, and on days that the astronauts are supposed to be in space, they're going to let them go to Vegas? Hilarious. Story 21. I have a customer that's always been a little conspiracy theory why, and for the most part, it was fairly harmless stuff I could laugh off until when he watched the Olympics opening show, he just kept going around the bend and told anyone and everyone who would listen that it was a show that was a communication to the devil and that they actually ate the child that was in the show. Firkin ate them. At first, I thought he was joshing, so I'm like slightly uncomfortable laugh feeling trapped. Because I do know that not everyone knows the Feast of Dionysus. So I sort of gave him a pass while trying to explain that to him. Welp, he just dug in further and is now preparing for the arrival of the Four Horsemen. He has one staunch supporter in the belief system nonsense, so as long as that one person eggs him on, he will never ever believe anything else. He very much believes the Dems are eating babies. It's flabbergasting. Story 22. A former friend was sincerely convinced that Earth scientists are conspiring to cover up all evidence of the moon being a starship rather than a natural satellite, in a method literally modeled after Winston's job at the start of 1984. Not even the fact that his key piece of evidence for this claim can be disproven in 6 seconds on Google, that the moon is within the Roche limit of Earth and should be torn apart by Earth's gravitational stress. Earth's Roche limit is 18 miles above the planet. The moon orbits Earth at around 21x that distance and is slowly drifting further away, could dissuade him of this idea. Story 23. This one is very personal and local, but I once was smoking meth with an acquaintance in the desert in Tucson, and he went on to tell me that we were being followed and stalked by government special forces and that they were using small squares of carpet to walk on, so they didn't make a sound as they walked in the sand. They had thermal and night vision goggles, and he was finding pieces of their equipment left on the ground in the morning, pieces of plastic and wires and whatnot. These were pieces of electronics that the two of us literally dismantled the night before, whilst on meth. It was that night I realized maybe I should stop doing meth. I didn't stop, but at least I knew I should. Story 24. I once saw a video on YouTube implying that all the natural terrains on Earth, like mountains or, on contrary, valleys, are actually the result of a massive ground excavation and withdrawal by some aliens. Like the Earth was almost a perfectly smooth sphere once, but then some alien creatures stole vast amounts of soil, and now we have mountains and other land relief. Oh, yeah, and of course, there are forces that obscure that fact so that you wouldn't know the truth. Story 25. Oh boy. There's a guy around here affectionately known as Vegan Pete. Now, there's a reason we use vegan with derision in his case. I used to say that he makes other vegans look bad. He's been banned from several cafe and restaurant type establishments and has a huge list of conspiracies to share. Here are but a few I've heard over the years. The Austrian painter was a woman. He also thinks I am biologically male, but I am not, because his foolproof measure is the index or ring finger length thing. Space doesn't go much further out than the moon. All aircraft and space rockets are actually inflatables designed to trick us into thinking NASA are going and have been to space. When she was alive, the queen was literally the queen bee of a secret race of insectoid overlords. The checkers on the uniforms of British police are the mark of her drones. Nobody died in Sandy Hook or Port Arthur. All mass shootings are a hoax or cover-up. For what? I have no idea. I heard from a friend who worked at a local produce market that Pete was going on about that Malaysia flight that went down, and that it was fake. One of the other staff at this stall gave him an earful because his sister was on that flight. He invited me to a 3-day private juice cleanse on his remote rural property, and I politely declined.